searching for you. I'm still searching for you.
Yeah, changed out the intro for, well, I'm using the one for the weekend today because evidently every time I've been using the other one, the music keeps getting copyright claimed, despite the fact that the guy says, this is copyright free. So I double checked his fine print and he says, oh no, if you're my Patreon, I will approve your stuff. So I'm like, okay. So I joined his Patreon, checked my YouTube stuff yesterday, and I'm like, guess what? I'm still copyright claimed on all the D&D openings.
It could be someone else who's also used his music matching to you and copyright striking you.
That is possible, but it's the copyright claim is from Hack or whoever the company is.
Well, at least you can have a word through Patreon.
Yeah, for sure. And interestingly enough, I don't know that we're actually live. It says we're live, but
yeah, we're live.
Are we live? Okay,
we are live.
Weird. All right. Well, good morning, everybody out there. I think we may be in a quiet chat right now. But that's okay. We'll talk until somebody shows up, or we'll just talk and maybe somebody will come back and check us out and go, oh, look what I missed. Oh, hey, Six is here. All right. I could sing a little ditty for you to use. Hey, can you? I might have to, you know. Can you drunkenly sing some, Viking awesomeness or something? That'd be good for this, right? All right. This is supposed to be our upbeat, positive take on TTRPGs. So probably nobody outside of the wrenches will watch this. Because, for the most part, it seems like everybody just wants something bad, or bad things are happening in the industry. And,
yeah, we could pick a week for it.
Yeah, we definitely could pick a week to be positive. Hey, Ironcasters, good to see you too. Darth Grimm. Ironcaster, I am your father.
Well, I did get a new hat, but it's like an olive green, so it goes semi-permeable on the green screen. So
I imagine. Yeah, we don't want to see through your head.
No.
Yeah, let's. It didn't look too bad. All right. Well, before we start getting into all of our positivity, let's go ahead and get the negative shit out. The TSR thing, I guess, is what we need to start with. When TSR announced that they were back, I was initially very, very excited. I was very happy. I was like, oh, wow, this company from my childhood has come back, and we're going to get some awesomeness. And then the controversy upon controversy started rolling in, and it was just kind of like, oh my gosh, this is, I don't even know anymore. And my understanding is like, the accusations they're leveling at the company is pretty much predicated on bullshit, because it's a group of people who are trying to insinuate that Ernie Gygax and his company are ists and phobes, which is the typical attack that we're all used to by this point. But then it actually happens, there is trouble behind the scenes with unfulfilled Kickstarters, some company rebranding that is a little bit dodgy. And then, of course, they're attacking you online, Grim.
Yes, to an absurd degree.
I don't know. What do you want to say about this?
Shall I do a quick sort of recap then of what's
sure.
happened, and then end with what's now happening to me? Okay. Right. So Ernie Gygax is one of Gary Gygax's sons. Gary Gygax, of course, is famous for being one of the main creators of D&D, the one who took it from a little tiny hobby business to a proper business. There were loads of shenanigans that happened at old TSR, but it's not worth particularly going into here. Wizards of the Coast bought out TSR kind of to save the company, because because of some of those shenanigans and some bad business decisions and so on. And so it was kind of, we're going to save D&D. As time has gone on, Wizards D&D has drifted further and further from the values, but I mean the kind of gaming values and the origins of the hobby. It's become something else. It hasn't so much expanded the audience as appealed to a different audience. And somewhat in reaction to that, you've got the old school Renaissance, where people have gone back to the original books, and that's been pretty popular, pretty profitable for a lot of small companies. A different firm did grab the name TSR and started producing some stuff that kind of harks back to the old TSR, not so much the D&D stuff, but things like Top Secret, which was an old espionage game that talked about other things. But a lot of the rights for a lot of the old material is a bit up in the air. That company, which was calling itself TSR, let their trademark license for TSR lapse. And this new company, the new TSR, to which Ernie is attached, swooped in, bought out the license, or bought out the trademark, licensed it to this sub company, though they've now abandoned it due to the kerfuffle and uproar. Yeah, they were only paying like $10 a month or something, or even a year, I think, something like that. Not very much money anyway.
Jesus.
So this new company are very much pitching themselves at the old school players, people who don't necessarily want political activism in their games and so on. Despite being heavily political myself, I can certainly sympathize with that point of view. But they're dodgy. Poaching the trademark is dodgy behavior. They're saying that they're developing things that it's not clear that they have the rights to. They say they're working with people, old TSR alumni and people from the OSR scene who claim ignorance of the fact that they're supposed to be working together. They're involved with the Dungeon Hobby Shop, which is meant to be like also a sort of D&D museum. That's a bit dodgy. What happened to all the money that went for a memorial for Gary Gygax? That's a question that's tied up with these people as well. So there are plenty of red flags on the business side, and these are the things that I think people should be concentrating on. I can't recommend the company or the people spend money on them given the business side. But what people are actually attacking them for is that after it was announced that they had the trademark and they were setting up the company and they were going to start putting out material, Ernie did the Ernie Gygax's son, did the rounds doing interviews with various places. I think this was called The Bunker. It's like a live stream interview thing. And he said a couple of things which are actually pretty innocuous, but they were enough of a crack for a wedge to be shoved in and for them to be accused of all sorts of things. So he mentioned that, a lot of the old school gamers, the people back in the day, they didn't necessarily have the same right on ideas around gender and so on, but they weren't bigots. He said something about gender identity issues and just kind of laughed it off as that being one of the things that's different. He wasn't attacking transgender people. He wasn't saying transgenderism is ridiculous or anything he's been accused of since. Just kind of saying, look, this is something that's different between the old days and now, and that's really it. So the trans activists have gone after him, and a lot of the woke scold mob within modern Dungeons and Dragons has gone after him for that. Also, he did a comparison of the way Wizards of the Coast came in and sort of corporate raided the old TSR.
Oh, yeah.
He did a comparison between that and warfare between Native American tribes. Now, in pre-Columbian days, right? Now, it's easy to see how someone can turn that into something racist, but it's actually a fairly accurate depiction of, pre-Columbian Native American warfare, and in fact, tribal warfare just about anywhere in the world at any time pre-modernity. So you can kind of see how they would take that the wrong way, but it's not a slam dunk. It's not this guy's racist. It's a cultural thing. Yeah, right. Tribal raiding is a cultural construct. But so then they start coming under attack, And the transgender thing, he starts getting loads of people attacking him and the company and anyone associated with them, calling them transphobic, calling them all kinds of names, and demanding that they make a political statement in support of transgenderism. Now, they've said they don't want to get involved in activism, whatever their personal views might be. So that was a pretty shitty thing to do, to demand that they bend the knee and recite the words, right? I mean,
I agree.
Yeah, whether you're asking them to say trans women are women, trans men are men, or the 14 words, I think in either case, demanding something of somebody like that is pretty shitty behavior. They responded to one of the people who was demanding this of them, saying that they were disgusting for demanding that they, say the words. Say
and
the
of
words,
course it was twisted. Yeah.
And of course that was twisted because the person who was arguing with them was a trans person. They took it to mean trans people are disgusting. And that quote has been cut out of context and pasted just about everywhere ever since. Plus a load of nasty stuff has been dug up, again, without context, about things that Gary Gygax said. I mean, the guy invented the game in 1974, by which point he was already middle-aged. Yeah, he's not exactly going to be the most progressive person in the world by today's standards, but by back then, we're talking about hippie culture. Mm-hmm. We're talking about the universities, which is where the game first took off. In the 70s, the sort of height, I guess the tail end of the hippie culture. These are not people who are going to be regressive or particularly conservative for the time, but a lot of what was progressive is now regressive, apparently. This is something I keep falling afoul of whenever I argue for free speech or free expression. But yeah, it hasn't gone well for them. People keep saying, well, don't you have a PR department? No, right? Most role-playing game companies have very little money. Margins are razor thin. It's usually just a couple of guys, if that, working out of an office. There is no money for PR. There is no one with the expertise in PR. So to suggest that they should get a PR consultant, or that don't you have a PR department, or this is basic PR stuff, none of that flies because nobody can afford one. And they reacted in a completely understandable way, developed a bit of a siege mentality. I know I've been on the other end of this kind of harassment. So I think that's all perfectly understandable. And, you say things crudely or misword them when your blood's up. So it's all completely understandable, I think. So, yeah. Right, so I've been defending Ernie on the basis that the reasons he's being attacked are bullshit, but also simultaneously pointing out that there are problems with the new TSR. So here's a measure of exactly how stupid this has gotten, okay? Today, I am being called a fascist. I'm being called a fascist.
Dude,
because,
you're like... Yeah, you're like the most...
I'm a left anarchist.
Yeah.
But I am being called a fascist because I'm defending Ernie Gygax on principle, because he's being lied about, while simultaneously criticizing them about real things that they're doing wrong, because Varg Vikernes said something in support, unsolicited.
Fucking Varg Vikernes.
Yeah.
Okay. Guys out there, if you don't know who Varg Vikernes is way back in the black metal scene, there was a band called Mayhem, which is pretty much the ones who are responsible for putting the black metal scene on the map.
For all the
member of the band was Varg Vikernes, and he stabbed the founding member of Mayhem to death, and he served 20 years in prison. And when he got out, he espoused a lot of neo-Nazi stuff. As a matter of fact, he almost got arrested again because they found a whole bunch of ammunition and shit in the back of his car at one point. Since then, he's moved to various countries and started some of his own role-playing games. But pretty much for the most part, he's kind of considered to be a problematic character.
Yeah, and he is still problematic. I mean, he did murder someone. He served his time. Technically, we're supposed to forgive people, after they've paid their dues to society. But, it's completely understandable and excusable to avoid Varg. I think he's got me blocked because I argued with him about some of his neo-Nazi bullshit.
No, not surprising.
Not exactly a follower. But
I actually thought about picking up a copy of his game to see if it was any good. But...
My Farog, I have seen a copy. It's not very good. It's just a kind of basic fantasy heartbreaker D&D ripoff. There's a few nice ideas in there, but if you know Varg is a neo-Nazi and you read through it, you can see his kind of racial philosophy and so on coming through. So I would say don't support him. He's one of those rare cases where this is a genuinely bad person with horrible points of view.
Gotcha.
But I'm not going to stop anyone buying it. I'm just going to say, yeah, I wouldn't. But let's take a moment to
waste my money on it.
Let's take a moment to bask in the ridiculousness of this, right?
Yes.
So Ernie, I don't know much of anything about him apart from he's Gygax's son. He comes under attack by a bunch of lies. So I defend him while at the same time talking about the bad things to do with the new company. Varg, completely separate from me and sharing virtually no political philosophy or anything with me, also supports him, possibly for bad reasons. Don't know. Varg might be a neo-Nazi, but he's also an old school gamer. I think he's a vegan. Does that mean all vegans are Nazis? I don't know.
Very Hitler.
Right, but because we both liked the same thing or tried to defend the same person for whatever reason, somehow that, by the transitive property, makes me a Nazi.
Wow. It's just a label, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's just something to throw at someone.
Yeah, it's just like, this is the worst insult I can think of, you know? I prefer the days back when we had more creative insults, like you are a shit-lapping, scum-sucking fucktard or something.
Yeah.
But
cock-bongling fuck jizzer.
Yeah, I mean, you know, what happened to those good old insults? Now it's just everybody goes with like the absolute shittiest insult they possibly can.
Yeah, everyone's Rick from the Young Ones now.
Yeah, I don't know. Golly, I can't believe they're attacking you for this, because it's like, you know, your video you posted yesterday even pointed out that you have problems with TSR as well as the people attacking them, and that's a very progressive point of view. I mean, you know, most people are not able to look at both sides of a problem and say, hey, look, there is problems on both sides, and you guys need to be aware of this. But I guess, you know, the mob wants you to be firmly entrenched in their side, or you are an enemy. And that is kind of what they do. They create a culture of other. If you are not one of them, you are other.
See, I keep thinking I'm dealing with rational actors, and that there is some combination of words I can put together that will communicate to them why I do what I do, why I believe as I do, why I criticize, and I can't seem to find it. So I tend to put the blame on myself. But I think the problem is probably them, actually.
Yes. Well, what a way to start out our positivity broadcast.
Well, if we start low, the only way we can go is up.
There you go. Yeah. Paste. All right. Well, we did promise we were going to try to say some nice things about TTRPGs, because we do love this hobby despite all of the problems that are emerging now. And it's not like these problems have never existed. There have been problems throughout the gaming industry pretty much since day one. And if it's not something to do with the people who wrote it, it's, you know, with the rules themselves. And usually we bitch about the rules themselves. So why don't we say some good stuff about the games that we do like? I'll start.
Okay.
One of my favorites is Torg, and I know I've mentioned this before, but what I like about it, what it got right, is, for one thing, it only uses one dice. It's a D20 for everything. The current edition also has added some D6s for some variety, but both games have a card mechanic where you can play cards that you hold in your hands to alter the storyline or inject more creativity into the storyline. And I love that idea because it kind of keeps players in charge of the narrative in a way to where, you know, they can meaningfully affect the story and the outcome of it. I like that kind of interactivity. I like that it keeps players involved because even if, you know, you got 7 players at the table, and that's a lot, you know, and even though you may not be focusing on that particular person at that particular time, somebody can still be listening to what's going on, and they can like, oh, I want to play this card, and, you know, change the scene and stuff, and so they can stay involved even when they're not involved. The other thing I like is they had a system called the possibility points, which was you could burn a possibility point and add an extra dice roll to your attempt at whatever you were doing, or you could literally alter reality in such a way as to affect your character. And they have upgraded this mechanic in modern day by using these special poker chip type things, which is kind of cool because it's like now you have more of a almost a not quite a gambling or poker mentality to it, but it kind of feels like it a little bit along with your role play. And I like these little what do you want to call it? What's the word for handling of small items? Tactile sensation to the game, aside from just rolling dice all the time or fucking around with the miniatures. You know, I think Tor gets it right on a lot of levels. But that's one of mine. Your turn.
Isn't Torg also king of the kobolds?
Possibly. I mean, you know, depends on whose universe you go to.
We'll have to check. Torg and kobolds ain't my baby.
The only problem.
Kobolds ain't my baby. King Torg. Yeah.
Oh, I hadn't actually played that yet. I've heard about it, but
so have I. I haven't played it. It does sound like fun. My turn. Let's see. I agree with the chat about the tactile feeling of rolling lots of dice, though. Yeah. There's just something satisfying about dice pool games. Well, the thing that first got me into gaming, there's got to be something good about that. And what it was the Fighting Fantasy game books. They did away with the need for having other people. And I didn't even know there were other forms of role-playing game than the kind of choose your own adventure books back then. But the art was hugely evocative. The setting was hugely evocative. The rules were easy enough for a kid to understand and get into. And those books, that system, that game, were very much, I think the intro for a lot of British role players, as much, perhaps even more so than D&D. See, I didn't come up with D&D. I came up through Fighting Fantasy books, Middle Earth role playing, Dragon Warriors, some sort of complex role play-y board games, things like that. That's how I came into role playing. But the main route was Fighting Fantasy game books, and Tunnels and Trolls ones later on. And both of those had a kind of funnel to bring you into proper role playing games. So it's interesting to see the idea of solo play coming up again. In some ways, I think that's a horrible indictment of the fact that we can't get groups together. But on the other, it can be a good entry point if you keep things simple. So, yeah, my first one is Fighting Fantasy, which for me was a perfect introduction.
yeah, and I read those too. The first one I started out with was Citadel of Chaos by Steve Jackson, and yeah, that stuff was amazing. I mean, it was well written for one thing. It's not like, even though it's, you know, kind of aimed at younger teens and stuff like that, it wasn't written in a childish language. The authors treated you like a grown-up. They gave you grown-up words, you know? Yeah, the gaming mechanics were pretty simple for the most part, just involving 2 die 6 for everything and extra sheets of paper. But man, I can remember going to the copy machines and printing out tons and tons of character sheets just so I could play these things. Because I was hooked, and I had every single one that came out here in America, which, as I found out later, that UK got a ton more than we did, man. That's talk about
loads.
unfair.
Yeah,
But
I had a friend at primary school who had every single one in its own special bookcase. So.
wow, and those things go for a lot of money now.
Mm.
And they've reprinted it a few times. There is currently a reprint of it by Scholastic. Unfortunately, they've changed all the artwork, which really looks. Ugh. But
there's app versions of a few as well.
Yeah, there. You can buy it up on Steam if you want to. Just look up Fighting Fantasy or any of those things, and you can actually play through the books, or you can play through actual games that they built on the books. And I am actually friends with Jamie Thompson, who wrote the Way of the Tiger series, which is one of my favorite choose your own adventure role-playing game books series ever. And I'm really trying hard to get him to come on to the show just to discuss some of the stuff. He's very reluctant, but I'm going to keep working on him.
I'm friends with Dave Morris, who did with Oliver Johnson, did a bunch of choose your own adventure books. I think Grail Quest, Kingdom of Weird, a bunch of those, and he also did Dragon Warriors, the role-playing game, which was another one of my early introductions.
Oh yeah, I'm a friend with Dave Morris also.
He's a sound geezer.
He is. He's a really nice guy. I'm also trying to work on him to bring him onto the show. I think he said his earliest availability is going to be August, but that's going to be a hot show. I think, at least for us, anyway. I don't know about anybody else. Everybody else will be like, yeah, whatever, man. But the two of us, I know we're going to be geeking out.
I need to take a quick bio break, so you're going to have to do 2 in a row. I'll be back as soon as I can.
Not a problem, sir. All right. Well, I'm talking to you guys directly in the chat now, so let me see what I can do for another one that I really like. A lot of people have said that Lamentations of the Flame Princess is overrated. I would, I don't know. I heard that comment recently. I don't agree with it. I think Lamentations is actually pretty good. It is based off the old school role-playing system, so it's a lot like classic D&D. Whatever you think of the creator, James Edward Raggi IV, his system is pretty sound. He keeps it simple. The weapons used to be, you could go through a book and you would find like a huge plethora of weapons, fouchered forks, halberds, two-handed swords, two-handed claymores, broadsword, longsword, dagger, poignard, all these different weapons with different names. And of course, they all had more or less close to the same damages across all the different weapons. So mechanically, there really wasn't a lot of difference in all the weapons. So he broke it down to be much more simple. You have two-handed weapons. You have large weapons, medium weapons, and small weapons. It doesn't matter what they are; they all do the same damage. So any kind of weapon that you have, if you want to say, oh, it's a two-handed sword with this, and this, it's like that is purely for effect. It has no mechanical difference. And some people might say, well, I can't really personalize my weapon that way. I'm like, no, actually you can, because then you can just say your weapon is whatever. The point is not, you should pick up the weapon that does the most damage, that has the most cool special effects, etc., etc., etc. This is more of a case of let's keep it simple. And I like that. Yeah, Aaron the Pedantic. Hey, it's good to see you. we're not going to talk about the adventures. We're trying to keep it positive, Aaron. I do know what you mean though. The adventures can be kind of problematic, depending. They do have a lot of high kill scenarios, which I'm not a big fan of. But yeah, like I said, he keeps the weapon system simple. The sense of progression from the start is good because unlike old school D&D, where you rolled your hit points and you were pretty much stuck with those hit points until you got another level to roll some more hit points up. You do get a decent amount of starting hit points for all your characters. Your wizard, your magic user, your magic casting class is actually not completely, going to be a dead man by the time he gets his first hit because he's actually got some decent hit points to start with. He does have less hit points than everybody else, but his spell casting is super duper powerful, and that is another thing I liked about their system. Hey, Grim, is magic users, depending on if you use Raji's alternate rules, a magic user can use every single spell in the spell book from level 1. I mean, all of them. The only difference is the effects are scaling. So, let's say you have like a high level spell. Normally, well, you could still throw it at first level. The only thing is now it's not quite as powerful as it would be at a higher level. He also eliminated a lot of problematic spells from the spell book. There are no wishes. There are no resurrections. And I know some of y'all out there going, "Those aren't problems, T-shirt. Those are really helpful." No, trust me, they're problems. We've discussed this before. And he did some really good things with Magic Missile. And he does give you like the most powerful spell I have ever seen in any spell book, castable at first level, which is Summon, which is guaranteed to be a big hit at parties. So, Lamentations gets a lot of things right. I'm not going to say it's absolutely perfect. There are things you could fix to make it better, of course, but staying positive, it is a really good system. It's free. All you got to do is go to his website, and he'll give you a download link to a illustration-free PDF of it. And if you're kind of the squeamish sort, I would recommend the illustration-free version. Just stick with it strictly for the rule mechanics, and it's not a bad system.
So I think you're missing out if you don't get the full proper edition, because it's a masterclass in how to create a theme and a mood in a very minimalistic way.
Mm-hmm. Ironcaster is a good point. Yeah, if the damage is largely the same, there's less incentive to pick one weapon over the others for min-max reasons. Yeah, and I have to agree. I have done this more than once. You start a new game, especially if it's a fantasy game. The first thing you do is look at the weapons. You find the one that does the most damage. You go, I want that one. I mean, who hasn't done that?
What?
You haven't done that, really?
No,
You're the eternal game master, though.
Oh, well, yeah. But when I do play, and when I play computer RPGs as well, I don't min-max. I always make them thematic. Mm-hmm. And as a result, they're a lot harder for me. so yeah.
Another system I really enjoy, I think that gets it right, is RuneQuest. Once again, you don't have 50 billion different weapons with different effects and all these other things. You have some pretty basic weapons, and they all do decent damage. Your characters have the hit points that they're going to have for the rest of their adventuring careers from the moment you bring them into the game. The big emphasis in RuneQuest is the skills, which you develop a skill by using that skill in game. Now, we made a house rule where if you attempted a skill check and you failed, you still got at least 1 point, as a token effort for trying to work on it that day. But I really like RuneQuest's commitment to. Well, I mean, there's really no way to min-max RuneQuest. I mean, other than taking a race that's ridiculous, like a Great Troll or something like that, which is super duper overpowered. But the monsters you're facing are also pretty powerful. I am also a big fan of hit location systems for combat. I mean, I know it's a little bit of extra paperwork and stuff like that, but it is so much more descriptive to combat when you say, it's like, okay, your thrust catches him squarely in the groin and he winces and whereas, instead of it's like, okay, you deal 6 hit points of damage. Wow. Wasn't that exciting? You did 6 hit points of damage. We don't even know what a fucking hit point is, but you did 6 of them.
Yeah. Combination of luck, health, armor, dodging,
stamina.
Yeah.
It never made sense to me. I like Vampire because it has mechanical effects to taking injuries. Actually, so does RuneQuest. But Vampire has it pretty noticeably because your difficulty in doing things starts to get harder and harder the more damage you have taken. So you do have a reason not necessarily to get into fights. And I like systems like this where the combat can be dangerous, Warhammer especially, because one of the problems you have with a lot of D&D players and stuff like that is let's face it, is the murder hobo mentality. Now, I don't guess we have the murder hobo mentality quite so much these days, where they just kill every single fucking thing they can because they can.
Yeah.
But I have noticed that, especially with 5th edition, players will tend to start fights with shit that they should not be starting fights with. And it is also more difficult to get them to back down from a fight when they should.
They're overconfident.
They're way overconfident. And it's like, you could throw some grossly overpowered monster and, with the intention that the party needs to run away now. And they won't. They'll sit there and they'll fight the damn thing. And the monster will TPK them. And then all the players will look at you, the GM, like, why?
Yeah. Or even worse, they will actually beat it.
Yeah, or worse.
Than you might like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just when you think the monster's going to eat everybody, it's kind of like, no, they managed to pull out the win. And then you're just kind of like going, well, okay, that was fun. But, this is why I don't run modules or pre-programmed adventures and stuff like this. I run everything totally off the cuff because...
Positive, remember? So
yes,
the deadliest systems force people to immerse more and think more tactically about what they're doing and to treat monsters with an appropriate level of fear.
Yes. I like that, yes. All right, well, it's your turn. I've done 2 or 3.
Okay. Feng Shui. The action game that's sort of based on sort of wirework kung fu films and
Wuxia.
And
I haven't played that.
Also Hong Kong action cinema. There was a game called Hong Kong Action Cinema.
I remember that one.
Which did it less well than Feng Shui, I think.
Yeah, Feng Shui was fun. And the
Feng
artwork
Shui
was beautiful.
Yeah, Feng Shui was what really convinced me that genre emulation, I mean, I'd always thought it was important, but really convinced me that it was make or break for a lot of games, where you marry the right system to the right setting and the two work together, perfectly. It also had very simple rules, but it didn't degenerate into, I hit you for 3 hit points, you hit me for 4 hit points, I hit you for 5 hit points. Because you got bonuses for doing weird stunts and crazy shit, whereas you would normally, quite rightfully, in a more realistic game, get penalized for that. In Feng Shui, it used the system to encourage you to do over-the-top shit. Mm-hmm. And it had staggered levels of bad guys. There were mooks that always got killed in like a single hit or even a single success on your attack roll. Mm-hmm. There were henchmen who were a bit tougher, perhaps roughly on par with the player character, or a little bit below. And then you had like bosses, the main bad guys, who were an actual proper fight against one thing. And yeah, it was incredibly simple. 2d6. There were templates of characters that you could customize, of things like Karate Cop, Chinese Sorcerer, things like that. Somehow it managed to weld it all together with a kind of hand-wavy background about ley lines and nexus points and things. But if you wanted to run any sort of over-the-top action game, if you wanted to do a John Woo film or Big Trouble in Little China, that you could just pick that up and you could be playing in extremely short order.
There you go.
So yeah, that's brilliant. Let's see, second one. Deadlands merits and flaws system. I've banged on about this before, but I'll do so again since we're being positive.
Yep.
In games where you have advantages and disadvantages, merits and flaws, whatever, often the players take things as flaws that end up never coming up in play, and so are never a drawback to the player. You as a games master cannot be expected to remember everybody's character sheet all the time. Deadlands used a kind of poker mechanic with chips that you could spend for boosts on your rolls and so on. And it encouraged you to play up your flaws by saying that you could choose whether your flaw applied and you could then get tokens for it. So say, for example, he said, drawing on something semi-topical, your character was in a wheelchair. An old prospector or something, lost a leg to dynamite, stuck in a wheelchair. So it would be up to you to bring up the wheelchair as a flaw whenever it was a problem, or you could choose to ignore it whenever it was a problem. So if you brought it up that, oh, well, I can't get up those stairs because I have a wheelchair, okay, you get a chip for that, and the rest of the players have to figure out something like carrying you up or whatever else. But equally, if you're then fleeing zombies from a half-collapsed mine in another section of the game, you could choose not to invoke your flaw so that you could keep up with the rest of them. Or you could choose to invoke it and get the token. And you could spend the tokens for boosted rolls or for experience for your character later on. So it takes it all out of the hands of the DM, or the GM, and puts it all on the players. And they, under that circumstance, because they want the chips, they play their flaws to the hilt.
Yeah, I love that. That makes me kind of want to pick it up. I don't know if my players would necessarily want to go for it just because it's a whole new rule set they'd have to learn. But
I don't know if it's in the new version, and I don't know if it's in Savage Worlds, which span out of Deadlands. This was first and second edition, I think.
Well, you could still buy reprints from RPG now. Drive-through RPG, whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
I think one that we could probably both agree on is the storyteller system. And by storyteller system, I'm not talking about WoD, but I am talking about WoD, World of Darkness. Storyteller system originally started with Vampire the Masquerade. Then they had Werewolf. Then they had Mage. Then they had Wraith and Changeling and Demon, I think, eventually. All these systems were pretty much using the same set of rules, which was you roll lots of d10s to do all your stuff, which as a system, that's not that necessarily that imaginative and everything. It's good. But what I think all those systems, all those games had in common that made them so good was the world building. The lore was so accessible to the players because you weren't dealing with a super high fantasy world. You weren't dealing with a place with a lot of preconceived notions. You were dealing with the time and the place that you're currently living in for the most part. And this is basically like a secret world that is like layered beneath ours. And I kind of think that Blade, the Vampire Hunter, the original Wesley Snipes film, took a lot of that Vampire the Masquerade inspiration. I mean, it's pretty prevalent throughout the film. If you're a vampire player, you'll see it.
Yeah.
But the richness of the story, the richness of the world, all this stuff. I've met Mark Reinhagen. He's a really super duper nice guy. I think he got kind of a raw deal by Modifius, which is why I won't buy their stuff. But I love Vampire. I
think Modifius only distribute. It's a different company that's making the material, I think.
Was it a different company? Okay, well,
yeah.
The company that's making it kind of gave him a raw deal, in my opinion. So I won't buy. I don't like 5th edition Vampire anyway. But yeah, I love the storytelling systems because the storyteller system, as they call it, because your characters are powerful to start with. I mean, they can easily overcome mundane challenges. A gang of thugs is not a problem for a vampire, especially not a problem for a werewolf or anything else. So what's cool about it is the characters have a sense of power. So it becomes more of an opportunity to tell stories, to have fun role-playing your character, and to immerse yourself in the lore of the game, especially if you have a really good GM. I don't know. Do you have any comments on this? Or?
It was one of those systems that's easy to get into. The other one that was a real big in for a lot of people was West End Games Star Wars. Yeah, they were both dice pool systems, which I think do have that visceral feel that a lot of people kind of hook into. Both of them, it was very easy. Yeah. Both of them, it was easy to create a character and get into play. Like in Vampire, you just had to fill in dots on a sheet, and you were ready to go. Really. So that's something that's good about it. It calls itself the storyteller system, but it was never really a narrative mechanic. It was more that there was an emphasis on role-playing a story, possibly too much looking back, but it did bring in a lot more artistic elements and different ways of looking at role-playing, what role-playing could be, what it could be about, building itself on the groundwork that was laid by Cyberpunk, I think, personally.
I agree.
And then the indie scene kind of came out of the people who came up on Vampire in the 90s, I think, for good or ill. I think there's both can be said. So yeah, it deserves its place in the kind of role-playing pantheon.
Yeah. Aaron's talking about telling stories. Okay. I think that is probably a positive we could talk about for role-playing games because while the GM is usually giving you the overall narrative by setting up the framework with which you're going to play, the players really do kind of contribute to the story in their own way by their actions and the things that they say to each other. So
yeah, I think that's a mistake a lot of not newbie DMs, but people who are just starting to outgrow their noobness. I think a lot of them take that storyteller thing from Vampire a bit too literally, and they want to run people through a story that they're dictating, which rarely works out well. But to my mind, role-playing works best when it's somewhere between a sandbox and a railroad.
I agree.
Where there's room to breathe and your character's actions have consequences and you can pursue storylines that interest you rather than necessarily being funneled towards one particular thing. But it's definitely a good way to learn about story and character, certainly as a writer, my other side gig, I guess. I find it useful for that. A lot of writers have been involved in role-playing games. China Mayville comes to mind, but there's plenty of others. So there's a lot to be said for role-playing as a way of learning about stories.
That's really cool, Brightest Day. And hello, Squeaka. Yeah. What I did. This is compliments for you and your group. Your Wednesday night group. I love, not necessarily because of the the TNA, but I mean that's nice. That's definitely nice. But what I love about them is they do kind of play their characters. They're creative and they're fun. A lot of times they will do things in that game that I wasn't expecting, or I'm used to a particular mechanical response from normal players. Like normal players are not necessarily going to get into a fight with everything.
Yeah.
And it's your testament. What?
Thunderwave.
Thunderwave. Yes, Thunderwave. Yeah. And it's a testament to your skill as a GM too, because I love the way you weave the narrative. The characters are fun, the story itself is fun, and it's some of it just makes me just straight out laugh. The encounter in the butcher's thing with the troll was hilarious. I fucking almost fell out of my chair laughing during that. I thought the party was really gonna die.
Maybe I better explain that to people. So, on this pirate island, there is a butcher's where they prepare exotic meats. And because it's hard to raise livestock on this tiny skull-shaped island that they're on, they keep bits of troll in their kitchen because it's constantly regenerating. So you can just carve off a troll steak whenever you want. Unfortunately, they forgot to cut it one day, and it got out of hand. And they had got the party to go and investigate. So they were attacked by all kinds of animated troll parts, and the main trunk of the troll that was hiding in a cauldron. So it was just his arms coming out to grab people and pull them in. So yeah, it was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, and that's the thing is you have all these little fun stories that add to the whole thing. It's how do I say? It's not your typical D&D game by any stretch of the imagination, and the players seem to have a good time. Everybody role plays. There's a lot more role play than there is ROLL play, I've noticed. I mean, yes, there is usually at least one combat per session, which is probably the intention. But I like it. I don't feel like the players necessarily just sit around, kind of going, well, okay, I'm just really waiting for this combat. Which is a problem that you end up with a lot of games and a lot of players. You have your players who like to fight, you have your players who like to role play, and usually the two don't interact well.
There's a lot to that game that is the way that I normally run role-playing games, like interesting NPCs, little side quests, little sort of set pieces, things like that. But we made a conscious decision not to go the critical role route, to kind of show role-playing with warts and all. We do a little bit of coordination behind the scenes just because our time is limited and you've got to make room for naughty things. But we wanted to show role-playing as is, the fun of it as is, that people go off on tangents and things don't go according to plan.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I like that. Certainly the audience participation makes some fun elements. That is definitely one thing I like better than Critical Role, and I don't think they could do it on Critical Role and maintain their level of play the way they do.
Yeah, it's very hard to voice act with a ball gag in.
Yeah, it is. But yeah, I mean, there is good role-playing games out there. There are good systems out there. Even D&D 5th edition can be good if you have the proper players, the proper GMs. Now, I'm not saying, that your players are not proper just because you're not having this wonderful experience that you see other people having on live streams and stuff like that, okay? It is an unfortunate thing, I think, that Critical Role has created kind of a false expectation of what you're going to get at a role-playing game session at a TTRPG. I don't have anything against Matt Mercer or his guys. I really don't. But, I think they set out with a good thing in mind but like I said, I think they created a false expectation, and people buy into that. And I'm kind of like, well, typically that's not what you're gonna get when you come to a role playing game, because you don't have a bunch of really pretty voice actors showing up at the table. You got Bill who may have a slight hygiene problem, and you have Greg who is a divorcee and has his wife constantly calling him on the phone every 5 minutes. And then you got like Steve, who is always on his phone all the time because he's got ADHD really bad.
Hmm.
And
Chrissy, who won't shut up.
And Chrissy, who won't shut up. Yes. So and I'm not saying your players are problematic or anything like that. What I am saying is, that's the reality of the world that we live in and the people that we deal with and interact with. But we can overlook these things to all have a shared experience and have a really good time with our role-playing games. And no matter which system you choose to play, play Torg. You can have a good time with it, and and just staying positive about it. There's a lot of negative bullshit that's coming out of the TTRPG community these days. Don't buy into all of it. There's good games out there. There's good GMs out there. There's good systems out there. There's a lot of fun to be had, and don't let these people tell you how to run your game.
There's lots of different ways that are all right.
Yes.
There's no really wrong way to play, except the way you do it. That's wrong. It's sick.
Sick bastards.
That was good. That was a good accent.
Thank you. I copied you. But
I've got some more general things that are good. I found a thread I wrote the other day on Twitter of positive things. Actually.
Oh, sweet, man. Let's lay it on there. Let's finish out with that.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll just go through the whole list then, semi-quickly. So it might not seem like it these days, but one of the things I love about gaming is that it has always been such an open, accepting, and accommodating community, because the game was what mattered, not anything else. And it was a safe haven from the anti-intellectualism going on in schools. If you were good at maths or English or whatever, if you were good at any subject, you were a target. And having somewhere you could just be yourself, and where being good at maths because you understood all the rules, or being good at English because you could describe things really well, where that was okay and that was a good thing, that was just wonderful to have. And, when we were young and we first started playing, sort of pre and during puberty, nobody really knows who or what they are. And having a safe arena in which to explore that through your imagination and stories, that's also good. A bunch of the kids turned out to be gay. Nobody gave a shit because we were all focused on the game. A couple turned out to be trans in later years. Still good friends. Nobody gives a shit because the things we have in common are through the game. It just, that's what mattered. If you were willing to turn up with dice and a character sheet and play and make a fool of yourself, it was all good. So the game was a focus of commonality, not division. The same way that some people talk about sports as creating a sense of community. You have your team that you root for. You had a similar thing there. I think it's always risky to emphasize the educational value of something because it tends to put people off. But role-playing can definitely educate you and help people who don't necessarily see the value in normal education.
Yeah.
So perhaps surprisingly, we had kids in our role-playing groups who were bad at maths, bad at English, dyslexic. Don't know what the numeral version of that. Numeric? I don't know. Dyscalculia. That's the one.
Dyscalculia. I have that. Yeah.
So we had kids with issues like that. We had kids who would these days be called autistic or Asperger's spectrum, but it wasn't picked up as much back then. They weren't getting picked on for being intellectual. They were being picked on for being dumb, but they were treated equally in our little space. And the game gave them the motivation to improve their skills, to learn better how to write, how to do basic mathematics, addition, subtraction, things like that, because it was in service of the game. So that was a great thing, especially for the kids who were awkward.
Yeah,
because a game provides a structure that you don't have in normal life, and so it feels more grounded. I think you're having a conversation, but you're having a conversation as a character and in a context that's spelled out, and that just seems to make it easier for them.
yeah, I agree. That is one cool thing about gaming, for the most part, is that you can take all these separate elements and all these separate different people, put them all together in a group, and just for a few hours have a good time. For the most part, I've actually seen some games break out into fist fights on occasion, because but that's a good thing too, even because that is a passion that shows that the people are really involved in their game and they're really enjoying it, or this stuff really matters to them. You really care about it, and that is awesome when you can get people together and be so passionate about something as as unusual as a game, or something so mundane as a game. You've got magic happening there.
Yeah,
and to me that's the
no, go.
That's the real beauty of TTRPGs. That's the real positive aspect of it to me. But, yeah.
And it's like your own little secret mythology with the people you play with as well, because you refer back to things that happened. And yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The stories that you create are going to stick with you infinitely. All the funny shit that happened at the game, you and your friends are going to remember. You're going to talk about it every once in a while. You'll snicker about it and joke about it in public with other people who won't have a fucking clue what you're talking about. And then you'll get a chance to explain it to them and then possibly pull them into your game too.
I do have one last story, which I think is really positive, and I think it's also opposite to the more negative atmosphere we've all got at the moment.
All right.
No names, but someone I grew up with was horrifically homophobic. Just beyond the pale. Mm-hmm. Turns out we discovered there was a reason for this, in that a man chased him and tried to abuse him when he was even younger. So it wasn't entirely without reason. He had a triggering incident and something that just made him absolutely terrified of men in that way, homosexual men in that way. Several of our group turned out to be gay as we all grew up, and it got him out of that mindset, though he still had a hard time with it to start with. To see them as human beings who he would have a conversation with, who he would share adventures with, that weren't going to do anything to him, who were his friend and so on. Mm-hmm. And so bit by bit, game by game, day by day, week by week, that irrational homophobia disappeared, and he became much more accepting and open, because we were able to put the focus on the game, because we were able to socialize him with people that you might otherwise disagree with, and have them see each other as human beings, not as a homophobe and not as a wrong-un. So I think that's something worth noting, and something that's perhaps being lost, but I view that as a tremendous positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if there's going to be always going to be new games coming out. There's always going to be new systems, new rules, mechanics, etc., etc. I don't know how many of our people that we will lose to computer role-playing games or not. I don't think they'll ever take over completely, no matter how multiplayer interactive they get, because there's something that's a little bit more fun, I guess I would say, about just being able to create these worlds in your imagination and these characters in your imagination. Current computer gaming technology doesn't allow you to create any kind of character you want in a computer game. You're still limited by this particular set of rules and things.
Or to do anything you want, like go up to a tree, break off a limb, and use it as a club.
Yeah, exactly.
Outside of the crafting games, but something like Baldur's Gate doesn't let you do stuff like that.
No, and you know, and the computer games, as much fun as they are, and as visual as they are, and as great music and everything as they have, they still limit a lot of what you're able to do in a role playing game. You know, for example, in my own game, well, I'm playing in it. We recently arrived at a city where there are a lot of refugees who have fled from a nearby city. So my character has gotten the idea that, hey, we're going to start an industry here in this city, and we're going to employ all these homeless people and give them jobs, and you know, because we have all this money that we just earned from another place, so we have tons of money. So we're actually setting up a business and employing all these people as laborers and things. For, you know,
Damn,
and
capitalist exploitation.
Capitalist exploitation, but with also with somewhat of a communistic bent, or I should say socialistic bent. I'm modeling the idea after William Hershey, who actually started the Hershey's chocolate factory. And his idea was to be kind of almost a utopian city where everybody would come to work and earn decent wages and be taken care of. And
same thing with Cadbury's over here. I don't know what it is about chocolate companies.
Well, because chocolate is nice. People who want to just make people smile by selling sweet things, I guess.
Was the Hershey's guy a Quaker? Because I think the Cadbury's guy was.
No, I don't think Hershey's was Quaker. But yeah, as a matter of fact, it is actually a chocolatier that I'm actually planning on opening in the game.
So the refugees are Oompa Loompas.
Well, I wouldn't call them that, but they might as well be. No, they're just people from another. Well, actually, it's funny. The place we did settle in used to be a halfling community, so yeah, that the joke hasn't been lost on me. It's like,
Don't
oh my
let
gosh,
halflings in your chocolate factory, you'll make no money.
Racism, racism against halflings.
I'm racist against second breakfast.
Yeah, 11sies. Oh, all right. Well, that's enough positivity for today. God damn it! Let's go and kill some shit, or let's go back to being negative for a little while. But you know, for the times that you guys play games, you know, enjoy the positivity, enjoy the great aspects of it. Don't let all the negativity that is being bandied about lately by people with agendas bring you down. You know, enjoy your hobby, share it with your friends, make good memories, have a great time.
Yeah. What are we doing next time then? Evil characters?
We could do that, yeah. We could do evil characters. Let's talk about evil characters, and there are problems with it too. But
yeah, but also it's a lot of fun.
It is a little bit of fun. Every once in a while, you got to break from the norm. All right. Well, we will see you guys later, and as I said, that we're going to be using the a different outro intro because, like I said last time, I got copyright claimed. So, you know what? Screw them. We'll stay with Faderhead anyway. I think everybody likes the music better. So, y'all take care. We'll see you next week.
Toodle.